Sunday. Sleeping had never been a problem for me. To be honest, I felt tired most of the time, but I put that down to a combination of my age and having a very busy lifestyle. So as soon as my head hit the pillow each evening, I'd be out like a light, not waking again until my 6:30 alarm began to scream at me. My wife, despite also insisting that she was just as tired, managed to squeeze in an hour or two of reading each night, something I would like to have done but never really tried. Therefore, it was strange to wake during the night. I reluctantly lifted one eyelid and waited for the brilliant red numerals to come into focus. 2:44 a.m. I stirred, listening out for whatever could have disturbed my sleep, my eyes again firmly closed. Perhaps someone had slammed a car door outside, or a motorbike had passed by. Whatever it had been, there was no sound now, and my wife had slept through it. I must have been quickly off again, but that slight disturbance seemed to add to my exhaustion the next morning. I dragged myself from beneath the duvet, the chill of winter having seeped its way into the house, fighting for power over the central heating. Grabbing my dressing gown, I slowly moved towards the kitchen, eyelids heavy, and clicked on the kettle. The first day of the working week, and I'm this tired already, I thought, knowing that my mood would not be a good one for the rest of the day. My usual routine was so well practiced that I was almost on autopilot. I made a coffee for myself, a tea for my wife, and powered up my laptop. She drank her tea in bed, whilst I sat at the desk to check my emails in preparation for arriving at the office. I showered, dressed, kissed my wife goodbye, and left the house. Monday ran through in its usual mundane way, and it had felt like an eternity before the clock on my office wall finally hit 5 p.m. Without hesitation, I grabbed my coat, hurried out of the building, not bothering to say farewell to any of my colleagues. After all, I'd be seeing them all again in the morning. I was home by 6 p.m., as with every weekday, and was greeted by the smell of dinner cooking, eyeing my wife pottering around our small kitchen. I felt something akin to pride. I knew I was a lucky man. After we had exchanged our pleasantries, summarized how each of our days had gone, and consumed the delicious meal that she had prepared, I told her about last night. It was bugging me, and it had been all day, but I was unsure as to why. "Something woke me up last night," I told her. "About 2:45. It made me more tired than usual." "Even more tired than usual?" she asked, her tone teasing. "Well, you should get straight to bed now then." "I'd like to, actually, but it's only just after 8, I replied. It was then that I caught the look in her eyes, a mischievous twinkle as she took my hand. "Then maybe we should go up to bed," she said, leading me upstairs before I could answer. We made love enthusiastically for almost an hour, something I'd been too tired to do for several weeks, and we drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, both satisfied and content. Monday. As I was falling asleep, I felt a relief that it was at least an hour earlier than usual and hoped this would make up for the previous night's disturbance. When I did awaken, I was sitting upright. I must have had a dream, but I couldn't recall it. However, my heart was racing and my hands shook. The room was in complete darkness, the only light emanating from the alarm clock's blinding red numbers. I glanced towards it, hoping that it was almost time to get up. I frowned when the numbers became clear. 2:44 a.m. What are the chances of that? I pondered. Slowly, I lay back down and placed an arm around my wife, causing her to stir. My heart was still beating faster than usual, and I felt a little odd. I could not explain why, but something felt wrong. "You okay?" she mumbled, eyes still closed. "Yeah," I told her. "I think I had a nightmare. Can't really remember." She was too sleepy to reply again, and I did my best to get back to sleep despite the eerie feeling. Upon returning to sleep, which must have happened quickly. Whatever nightmare had awoken me continued. When I was finally disturbed by the alarm clock, I was drenched in sweat, shaken, and all too aware of the details of my dream. Death had come for me in my dreams, in the guise of a tall figure, perhaps the Grim Reaper himself. In this horrific nightmare, I had heard the floorboards in my bedroom creak as heavy boots entered the room, and peering from beneath my duvet, I'd been able to make out the silhouette of someone or something. Transfixed on what I saw before me, unable to move, I watched as the intruder stood in silence above me for several minutes before a blackened hand lunged from beneath his cloak towards my face. Thankfully, my alarm clock pulled me back to reality just in time. The dream haunted me for the entire day, affecting my ability to concentrate at work and putting me on edge. My colleagues noticed that something was wrong, commenting that I seemed to be distracted, which I shrugged off as just being tired. It wasn't a lie, for I did feel exceptionally tired, but I could hardly tell them that I'd had a bad dream, or I'd be ridiculed. I did, however, attempt to explain the dream to my wife over dinner. "It was horrible," I complained. "I know it was only a dream, but I was shaking and sweating. You know those dreams that are so vivid that it seems real, even once you've woken up?" She nodded, looking at me with a mild level of concern. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about it all day. And now it's making me worry about going to sleep tonight." "The more you think about it, the more likely you are to dream about it. You know that. So let's have some wine and find a comedy to watch for a bit. Until you're almost falling asleep. You'll be fine," she promised. I wasn't so sure, but what she said made sense and I went along with it. We chose to watch a romantic comedy, which was more amusing than I had expected, and cleared 2 bottles of red wine between us, so I was more than ready to sleep by 10 o'clock. My wife placed her arms around me as we found comfortable positions, and once again I was soon in a deep sleep. Tuesday. Sleep came easily, but so did the nightmares. Different, yet similar. I awoke with a scream. Glancing at the clock, I was less surprised this time to see that it read 2:44 a.m. Less surprised, but even more terrified. Reaching over to my left for the comfort of my wife, I found her side of the bed empty. Panic rising within me. Pulling back the bed covers, a chill came over me. More than a chill. In fact, it was as though the window had been left open in the middle of winter. I could see my breath and I stood, reaching for my dressing gown. I resisted the urge to call out her name, but made my way to the spare room assuming she would be there. The room was untouched, as it had been for months. In the thick darkness, I felt my way carefully down the stairs, my eyes gradually adjusting to the lack of light. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw a fragment of light shining through the gap beneath the door to the living room. Still feeling on edge and afraid of something indescribable, I pushed the door open slowly. The lamp in the corner of the room was on, and there was a welcoming warmth inside. My wife, wrapped in a cotton throw, was asleep on the sofa with an open book lying on her chest. I sat beside her, placing a hand on her exposed thigh, startling her. She pulled away quickly, looking around the room in confusion. "Oh, your hands are freezing," she said. "Sorry," I mumbled. "The bedroom is really cold too. I woke up at 2:44 again, and you weren't there. I was worried." "I wasn't there," she explained, "because you were moving about too much in your sleep, making noises. Sounded like you were having a bad dream again. I didn't see any point in waking you up." "I was dreaming something, but it's all a bit muddled. Some kind of man, or creature maybe, came into the bedroom." She looked at me with some sympathy before suggesting we go back up to bed. She turned off the living room lamp and switched on the hallway light before leading me back upstairs. The room still felt cold, but my wife did not seem to notice. She buried herself beneath the duvet. I wanted to leave the light on, but despite the fear that I felt, I knew how ridiculous it sounded. So, I opted for trying to stay awake instead. I watched the numbers on the alarm clock change, painfully slowly, until the hour had moved from 2 to 5. As early as that was, it was not unreasonable to get up, and the sooner I could turn on the lights, the better. I spent the early hours pottering around the house, slowly preparing myself for the working day ahead. I sat with a coffee, toying with the idea of calling in sick, but decided against it. There was nothing to be gained by staying at home, apart from the opportunity to sleep, but that was the one thing I wanted to avoid. I felt anxious, unable to shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen, even though I told myself how illogical that was. I kept myself as busy as possible, passed the hours away in the office as best I could, and made my way home once again. If tonight is no better, then a trip to the doctor may be needed, I told myself, wondering whether sleeping pills would stop the nightmares. But first, I need to get through tonight. A sense of dread came over me as the evening moved on quickly, the hours disappearing, and the unavoidable darkness approaching. Wednesday. As I prepared myself for bed, brushing my teeth, undressing, and so forth, I noticed a tremble beginning in my hands. My palms felt clammy, my pulse quickening, and a wave of nausea swept over me. This is ridiculous, I told myself. It's just a bloody dream. My wife could see how anxious I felt, but there was a look of helplessness in her eyes. She knew there was little she could do to comfort me, just as much as I knew that I had to endure these terrors in solitude. Despite the overwhelming amount of tiredness I felt, sleep did not come easily. Fear had sunken its claws deep within me, and my body did everything it could to fight against what I knew would come. The last time I recall looking at the clock was almost at midnight, and my wife had already fallen asleep. Must have been soon after this time that I finally nodded off. It wasn't a dream that woke me this time, nor did I open my eyes in blind panic or cold sweats. I woke to my wife gently shaking me, whispering in the darkness. It took me a few moments to register what she was telling me. "There's someone at the door," she said quietly. I looked to the clock, the familiar numbers glaring at me in their bloody redness. 2:44 a.m. "There can't be," I told her, not as confidently as I had hoped. "I heard someone," she continued. She sounded frightened, and so I attempted to hide my own fears. Had the light been on, she would surely have noticed the ghostly shade of white I had turned. I had no doubt that something was outside, and I knew that there was no way my wife would go back to sleep without me investigating. My legs felt heavy as I swung them over to the side of the bed, as if they were afraid to leave the perceived safety of the duvet. A little unsteadily from both tiredness and nervousness, I made my way onto the landing and flicked on the light. My eyes closed slightly in response, gradually becoming used to the glare. I was certain that if someone, or something, was waiting at the door, then it would not be friendly. As I took the final step, I glanced around for something to use as a weapon, but could only find an umbrella. It would be unlikely to be much use, but I felt a tiny bit more powerful with it in my hand. I could see nothing through the frosted glass of the front door. No shadow of someone waiting, no light of any kind. If there had been someone there, they must surely have gone. Knowing that I had to open the door in order to satisfy my wife, I moved my free hand towards the keys to unlock it. My heart raced, my hand moving more slowly than I wanted. Before making contact, the cold metal of the keys touched my skin at the same moment that something struck the glass of the door. I jumped back, falling backwards and kicking myself away from the door. The security light which comes on whenever someone approaches the door gave no illumination. I stared at the glass, breathing heavily, waiting in the silence for something to happen. Nothing came. No bang on the door, no movement outside, just stillness. I heard footsteps behind me, causing me to startle again, and was relieved to find my wife standing at the bottom of the stairs.
"What happened?"
she asked, confusion on her face as she looked down at me sprawled across the floor, umbrella still in hand.
"I went to open the door, but something banged on the glass. Scared the crap out of me. Have you been out there?"
she asked, looking at the door nervously.
"I was about to, but I don't think there's anyone there. I couldn't see anyone through the glass, and the light hasn't come on. Just have a quick look, please,"
she asked, much to my despair.
"It was probably some drunks on the way home, but I won't be able to sleep if we haven't at least checked it out."
You won't be able to sleep, I thought, but kept the words to myself. My face must have given me away, however, as she stepped over me, towards the door.
"Jeez, I'll do it."
I still did not move, and I felt a pang of embarrassment for being so cowardly. I watched intently as she reached for the set of keys, expecting something to crash against the glass again, but there was only silence. I heard the lock click and watched as my wife pulled open the front door. She was greeted by only darkness and a bone-numbing chill in the air.
"Nothing there,"
she said, turning to me again as I began to stand, the door remaining open behind her.
"Let's get back to bed."
I began to climb the stairs as I heard the door close and the keys turn in the lock. Something caught my eye on the way to the bedroom. A reflection in one of the picture frames. Something dark behind her. I turned quickly, seeing only my wife following me up the stairs.
"It's just the lack of sleep,"
I told myself, but I knew this was a lie. Thursday morning. My alarm screeched at me, forcing me from my slumber. It was still dark and exhaustion had left my eyelids heavy. It took a matter of seconds to decide that I would be calling in sick to work. I turned to the spot where my wife should have been sleeping, only to find it empty. I must have been disturbing her again, I guessed, hoping to find her in the spare room. The sofa bed which we used on the rare occasion that we have guests remained untouched, so I made my way down to the living room. Empty. I called out her name, getting no reply.
"Susan! Susan! Susan!"
I had to try to recall what day it was, but this made no real difference. My wife had never been a morning person. I could not remember a time she was out of bed, let alone the house, at this time in the morning. Something was wrong. Of this I had no doubt. I raced back up the stairs, grabbing my phone and dialing her number. The ringing on my phone coincided with a vibrating sound from her side of the bed. She never went anywhere without her mobile, and this revelation set off a fresh burst of panic within me. What do I do? I wondered, genuinely clueless. The police won't be interested, as she hasn't been gone for more than a couple of hours. I racked my brain, trying to think of anywhere she could be, but came up with nothing. There was nowhere that my wife would logically be before 7 a.m., except in bed. I threw on some clothes so that I could check outside to see if her car was still parked along the street, but I froze when I got to the front door. It was locked, with my keys in the lock on the inside, just as it had been last night. Short of crawling through a window, there was no other way out of the house. The back door was never used, and so had a pile of boxes stacked in front of it which had lived there since we had moved in. I checked, but they appeared to be undisturbed. The only other explanation was that she was still in the house. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes now, fearing the worst. She would have answered me if she could, which meant something was terribly wrong. I ran room to room, finding each one empty. Out of ideas, I went back to my plan to see if her car was still there. Sure enough, it sat in the space it had occupied for the last few days. I found her bag in the living room, which had also been left behind, containing her purse and keys. It was as if she simply vanished. Having no other alternative, I called the police. I explained that she was missing, And yes, I understood that it had not been for very long. It was as I was detailing the mysterious knock at the door, the fact that the house was locked from the inside, and that she had left everything behind. I heard her voice. In a state of utter confusion, I hung up on the police call handler, ran back up the stairs. Stretching her arms as she woke, lay my wife. Looking at her then, it was as if she had been there all along. But that could not have been.
Where were you?
I demanded, fighting back tears. She looked confused.
What are you talking about? I've literally just woken up. No!
I began, faltering a little, beginning to doubt my own mind.
I got up. You weren't here. I looked everywhere, even outside to see if your car had been moved. I was calling you. If I didn't answer, it was because I was asleep,
she replied, starting to sound annoyed.
Perhaps you were having another dream. But don't worry, I'm right here. We're taking the day off.
I told her, changing the subject a little.
I don't feel right, and I think I need some rest. What are you doing today? Nothing planned. Maybe we could just chill out, watch some TV or something. You could have a nap on the sofa,
she offered.
That sounds nice,
I replied, smiling weakly.
Let's do that. Bring the duvet down to the living room and I'll find something to watch.
I made my way to the kitchen to make coffee, debating whether to make an appointment with the doctor, not noticing that one of the kitchen knives was missing from the block. Thursday evening. The day went by in a blur as I dozed between episodes of some fantasy drama that my wife had put on the television. My short naps were fitful, causing me to awake in a panic, but with no recollection of the details. I drifted off once more after dinner at around 7 p.m. Slept for almost 3 hours. It was dark in the living room when I woke. The television was off. So was the lamp that my wife would sit beside to read. I called her name, but there was no response. I reached down to the side of the sofa to find the switch for the lamp on my side of the room and flicked it on. The darkness was shattered by the glow, revealing a sight even worse than those which had come to me in my nightmares. On the opposite sofa sat my wife, head slumped forward, wrists cut by the knife which had landed at her feet. Between the two of us loomed the dark silhouette that I thought I had seen a few nights beforehand, and even in the light, it appeared as a solid mass of blackness. The bulb in the lamp exploded after less than a second, just enough time for me to take in the horror of what I had seen. I tried to stand, but my legs gave out beneath me. I knew it was too late by this point, as I waited on the floor for the inevitable to come. Only it didn't. There was no attack on me, no sound or movement from the shadows. I pulled myself along the floor to the other lamp, cautiously flicking it on, expecting this bulb to shatter as well. But it did not. Light flooded onto the gruesome scene. I reached for her, hoping it wasn't too late. I placed my hands over the wounds on her wrists in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding, but any chance of saving her had long since passed. I broke down in howling sobs, my head in her lap. When I had regained a little composure, I once again tried to stand, spotting the scrap of paper beside her. I unfolded it, trembling, terrified of what it would say. As I read the words over and over, I knew it was too late for me also.
I had to. I'm sorry. You're marked. They wanted me to kill you, but I wouldn't do it. I love you too much.